out just what you've seen over the course of your 30 years in Secret Service and also being a professor of criminology. Lynda Williams here works with MTSU. Thank you for being here.
And thank you for having me, Hunter.
It is such a pivot, but such an important conversation. If you're just joining us, all day long we've been following news of just a tragic school shooting at the Covenant School in Green Hills. That active shooter call came in this morning at 10:13. We know law enforcement took down that shooter at 10:27, so a 14-minute response time, but we know that 6 people died, 7 including the shooter. 3 of them were kids and 3 others were staff members. You had the director of schools, you had a custodian, you had a substitute teacher, and just such a tragic loss that we saw today.
So first of all, my thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their loved ones. You know, we send our kids to school and we think they're safe. And they're supposed to be safe. So when things like this, how do you make a child feel comfortable again? And they just show you how vulnerable we are, that there's no place safe. And particularly when we're talking about our babies.
No place safe, and we've talked about this school in depth, and it's different than when you see other school shootings, right? In the days and the weeks after, you find out, you know, how they gained entrance, and you know, sometimes it's an unlocked door. That was not the case here.
Exactly.
We know that the Covenant School, they've held different drills over the years, and that everybody was prepared for something like this to happen. Those doors were locked, and yet you see this 28-year-old shooter who comes with 2 assault-styled rifles and a handgun, shoots through the door and still gains access.
So, you know, from lessons learned, when you know better, you do better. And we've come a long way since Columbine, and, you know, putting in the right protocol in place. But even still with preparation, that element of surprise. And so Covenant School did everything they were told to do. They have practiced, they have gone through drills, and then they have fortified the school. But when you have someone that are intent for delivering harm or to do harm, that element of surprise, because everything that Covenant put in place is supposed to have worked, but you don't know that element that when you have a shooter that shoots the lockout, and you know, and then this was a private school, so you know, resources weren't like in some other places. So it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy, and yet we have to learn from this and try to pick up the pieces and continue on. And
that's where it's so hard, right? You mentioned Columbine, happened in 1999. I grew up 5 minutes from Columbine, and you'd like to think all these years later that we have learned something, and that at some point there was something that we as a society did to stop things like this from happening. And unfortunately, it is just a tough conversation that we continue to deal with. I believe we have our first caller. Josh, tell me who is on line 1. We have Lynda, who is on line 1. Lynda, can you hear us okay?
Hello.
Hi, Lynda, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a remark. I noticed today the governor did not even show up at the scene or make any statement at all. And the way he has made the gun law so lax in Tennessee, where you don't have to have a permit, you don't have to have any training or anything to buy a gun, and now they're wanting people to be able to just carry assault weapons anywhere they want to. I think those should be banned. No one needs assault weapons for hunting or things like that. They're just made to kill. And I would just like to know what you two think about that. I mean, the politicians are so worried about the gun lawlessness and their payoffs from them, they could care less about human lives.
All right, Lynda, thank you for calling in. We'll address your question here. She mentioned how, you know, the governor didn't show up on scene and you know, didn't release a statement. He did release a statement earlier, and he just said, you know, they're looking into all facets of this, but to join this community and praying for the school congregation in the Nashville community. So certainly we've seen that from our local leaders here in Nashville and around Tennessee, just this idea of sending thoughts and prayers to all of these victims and everybody who was affected today.
And you know, condolences are needed, but what do? We keep repeating the same things because we keep doing the same thing. You know, Columbine was, you know, in the 1990s, but just in 2012, Sandy Hook. And I think that hit differently because they were babies. They were elementary school kids. And, you know, everybody was stunned and stopped for that moment. But here we fast forward 11 years later, and we're still babies getting killed. And so it takes us to hit our legislator, you know, where we're so quick to, you know, overturn abortions to save lives. But now that the kids are here, we're not protecting them when they go to school. And so it takes us talking to our legislator, and this bipartisan does not exist. And so even as the president, regardless of what your political affiliation, we have laws, and she's correct, that assault rifles and weapons shouldn't be at the hands of everyday citizens.
And you mentioned too, just babies, this idea of now that these babies are in the world, where do we protect them now that they're here? Where is the action to support that? And certainly something I think we're going to see just more discussions on in the coming days. We have another caller, Angelique, who is on line 2. Angelique, can you hear us okay?
Excuse me?
Can you hear us okay?
I hear you just fine.
Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and speak.
Yes.
I'm calling in today. I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I'm calling in today is because I have a couple of things I want to say. Okay? I'm not from Nashville, Tennessee, but I live in Nashville, Tennessee. Okay? I've cried 5 times today about the children that got killed. It really hurts my heart. It breaks my heart because I have a child in school myself, and I worry about not my son's safety. I worry about around the whole country safety for children. I pray every day for the world, but I will say I don't believe in my heart and soul that the politician does not care about the children that got injured or anyone else but gun control to make their self and their pockets line up. They do not care about the Nashville, Tennessee area. Governor Lee does not care about Nashville, Tennessee area. He only cares what he can get for himself. I'm just being honest. But I do love Tennessee, and I do feed the homeless. Have a blessed day.
Angelique, thank you for calling. And you hear in these moments in the wakes of shooting, there's people who not only are you heartbroken, but people who are angry.
Absolutely.
People who are angry that these were babies, 9-year-olds who lost their lives today, long tenured staff as well, who, they signed up to be an educator. They didn't sign up to be a protector.
Absolutely.
And just a tough reality that we're now having to deal with. We have another caller, Brian, who is on line 3. Brian, can you hear us okay?
Hello?
Brian, go ahead.
All right. I would like to say that what will happen when they pass this law that 18-year-old kids can possess guns legally.
Can you go ahead and repeat that question? I'm sorry, Brian.
I was saying that what will happen when they pass this law trying to make 18-year-old kids legal for guns.
Brian, I think there's some feedback. I'm going to hang up the phone so we can kind of discuss that real quick. I'm not sure if he's referring to the president's call that we heard again today about just this further ban assault rifles. But your take on that, we heard from President Biden today, who not only shared his condolences and called for thoughts and prayers, but also just demanding that Congress do something.
Right, because we're a nation of laws. And of course, these people that are sitting in Congress, we put them there. And so the onus is on us to, challenge those legislators that, we put them in office and they show where their priorities are. One life is one life too many. And it is showing itself that, when the assault ban law was not reinstated, it had a 10-year sunset, and it's gone now. And so now here we go, and we continue with the access to these rifles. And again, everybody stand back and watch, and continuously these mass shootings are occurring daily. I mean, it's come so natural that, I remember when Columbine, everything stopped, Hunter. Everything was on TV, stopped. Now you see, like even that one a week or so ago in Denver, it rolled at the bottom of the television.
I know.
But that's somebody's life. That's somebody's children. And then today, what do we tell our children? That, this is supposed to be a safe place. This is a Christian school. And now they don't feel safe. And what about the psychological scars that these kids will have?
It lasts forever, and you think of just the kids who were in there. It was a school of 209 students, 40 staff members. We had heard from our colleague Hannah McDonald, who has relatives there, and she talked about just how this was a close-knit and it was a small school. And there's no doubt, we know the gunfire was coming from the second floor, that probably about everybody in that building heard those gunshots, and that's something that so many little babies now have to cope with at such a young age. I mean, with it being preschool to 6th graders, the oldest just 12 years old.
Exactly.
In there. It's awful. We have Jess now, who is on line 4. Jess, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Go ahead. Jess, you there?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm metal detectors is where it's at, and I've put a lot of thought into this. Somebody walks up, somebody running the metal detector, nothing says they pull a gun out and shoot them. And double doors. They get through that first bit of security. I mean, our schools become prisons. Metal detectors, double doors, and if they get past that first person, they've got a switch there. They hit it and lock everything down. I mean, they've got too much access.
Jess, thank you for calling in. That's going to be something too we hear is just about the security at these schools.
They do what they can with the resources and funding. It would be wonderful if we could re-fortify every building,
right.
every school, but we're at a deficit for funding.
Where's
just
the
for
funding?
school books. And so, so every school has taken on to do the best to implement a protocol of safety. The doors are locked. They've gone through drills. I bet every child is to run, hide, or fight as your last resort. And this is what they're taught. So we have to take the resources that we have to try to do the best, but we have to go to the source. And the source is these weapons.
And
these
everybody
weapons of mass
quick and has their own idea of how we solve this. But in terms of the Covenant School, if you're just joining us, what we know right now too, and from Metro Police, is that this school, it really seems, did everything right. The doors were locked. They did these drills, and they were as prepared as anybody could be. And unfortunately, when you have this evil, sinister mentality, there's no telling what somebody can do. We have another caller who's on the line. Ann is on line 5. Ann, can you hear us okay?
Yes. Sadly, I used to joke that I was a glorified flunky because I spent many years in metro schools being responsible for keeping doors locked. Metal detectors aren't going to help us. Locked doors aren't going to help us. As long as the people that are doing the shooting continue to be familiar with school layouts and where the weak spots are. Today's shooter knew to bring a gun. So there was some reason for that because they knew that the doors were going to be locked. They were ready to shoot the doors open. There are no words that can console any of the victims from today, and it's going to keep happening until we change our gun laws. The earlier caller brought it up. Bill Lee and the Republicans are trying to right now get legislation passed through that will make it legal for 18-year-olds to possess and purchase guns. They have no business with it. If they're still in school or they're 18 years old, it's been proven men don't mature till their 20s. We need stricter gun laws. And until there's a change, no locked door, if the day doesn't show my point, no locked door is going to protect the children when we have the laws that we have right now. I'm sorry that we've had to have this conversation.
Me too, Ann. Ann, thank you for calling.
Ann, thank you.
I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. And she's right. We have to go to the source, and we keep pushing the envelope and still manufacture guns. We won't stand up. We won't have the laws. And what does it take? We thought when it started affecting elementary school kids, children, well, all the schools are children, but babies, that it would change. And it pulled on our heartstrings for a little bit after Sandy Hook. But then you see, we pushed it, and here we are again in 2023. And it won't be our last because they still have access to these weapons. We still challenge background checks for guns. You have to go through a background check to get just about anything, your driver's license, to get a job, or anything else, but we're giving people the capability to take a life.
And Lynda, it's tough too, right? When we're also hearing callers who have been critical of just the Republican response out there on Twitter. We've heard a lot of thoughts and prayers, and I think that is so appreciated. I know I've sent so many prayers up for these little babies' families today, and we have heard from people in the building who say, please pray for us, and I think that's all anybody can do right now. But I think there comes a time too when you hear from people who were angry in this situation.
Absolutely.
And I think you want to see something tangible in those moments where you can say, hey, that will be the change that we need to make this stop happening.
And we have to, because like you say, Covenant School did everything. And even with the limited resources, some schools have SROs and magnetometers. This was a private, a Presbyterian school. And so it did everything that was supposed to. And even as we've seen in the past, if the SRO is present, it doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be any fatalities.
Right. There's no guarantees in these situations.
We have to go to the source and remove the weapons.
Yep. Well, we have to take a quick break. We have our callers all queued up, and we're going to get to all of your calls right after the break. To this Monday night edition of OpenLine. I'm your host, Hunter Hoagland, joined by Lynda Williams, who is a professor at MTSU. You teach criminal justice and teach young people how to be better equipped entering the world of law enforcement. Tonight on OpenLine, we are talking about that tragic school shooting that happened around 10 o'clock this morning at the Covenant School in Green Hills. We've been wall to wall all day hearing from members of law enforcement, hearing from you guys as well. A lot of insightful comments tonight. We have more calls to get to. I believe Thomas is on line 7. Thomas, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I sure can. Hey, I just looked this up. Tennessee gun laws. As of July 1st, 2021, an adult can carry a handgun openly or concealed in Tennessee without a permit if the person is 21 or older, or 18 or older for certain military members. Tennessee is a permitless carry state. I would love to hear some comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hang up the phone so you can hear the answer.
Thomas, thank you for doing your homework. You know what? I clutched my pearls when I found out how easy it is to carry a gun. One, it's hurting law enforcement because at this point we don't know who can have a gun, who does not, and it's not helping our society. So we're afraid for those that we know. This is an unknown threat, and so our state is moving backwards, and that's why we have to put the onus on our legislator. And when we vote, know what these people's platforms are and what do they represent. And it's not just a money thing, that is actually a preservation of life for the citizens of Tennessee.
And we know the school shooter today, she came in that school with 2 assault rifles, 1 handgun.
And a handgun.
We know from Metro Police that 2 of them were acquired legally. We're not sure about the third, and it sparks a new conversation. Who needs an assault-style rifle, right? We've already heard that
As
from
a civilian.
Yeah, as a civilian, and it's just senseless when you think about everything that happened today. We have another caller to get to. I believe Henry is on. Let's go. Do we still have Greg on line 9, Josh? Okay, Greg is on line 9. Greg, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Greg, go ahead.
Yes. Okay, I'm just calling because it's tragic. And I think this governor need to reconsider, because the laws back in the days when they had the Constitution, and it is 2023. And I feel as though that if you have the right to bear arms, okay, get a permit, just like the driver's license. Even though they said 2 of the guns was permittable, but the fact of the matter was they permittable to her. And so the fact of the matter is, bear arms were bear with responsibility and a permit. It's just simple as that. I'm gonna hang up and just listen what you all saying. And it's real tragic now. It done happened to Nashville, Tennessee.
It is tragic. Greg, thank you for calling in.
No place is immune. None. And it's shameful that we're going backwards. You know, you have to take a test, you have to do certain things to get a driver's license, a driver's permit. You know, we don't even have background checks. So, you know, mental health is real. And so we are overriding that. So not only that age will allow a person to be able to acquire a weapon, but the mental status. And so what are we doing? That's the recipe for disaster. And that's why we see these things play themselves over and over and over.
And as everyone here in Nashville is trying to cope, I believe, the last school shooting that happened here in Nashville was 1994. And all these years later, now that tragedy comes knocking again, it's so hard to stomach, so hard to realize the gravity of what happened today, that 3 young lives were lost, that a substitute teacher, a director of schools, and a custodian lost their lives as well.
Human beings.
Human beings, and that we're going to keep learning more about, I'm sure, in the coming days. I believe we have Henry now on line 10. Henry, can you hear us okay? Henry, are you there?
Hello. Yes, sir, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Hey, can you tell me exactly what y'all consider a assault-style rifle?
Is that your only question? If so, I'm going to hang up so you can hear her answer.
No, I mean that, and also, when did it change where anybody over 18 years old or 18 years old or over couldn't go and legally buy a long gun?
I'll let you address
So
this.
he asked if he can hang up so he can hear us.
Yeah, I'll hang up and she'll address your 2 questions.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm not a weapons expert.
Yeah.
There's classifications of different type of weapons, and some are considered and categorized as assault weapons. And so even as these laws, they realize what weapons would be attainable or that a person can get. And so even still that they have been labeled as such should not be in the hands of everyday citizens. And then of course we go on backwards with the lax, availability or how we can get these weapons. It's a recipe for disaster. And so it keeps on, and Tennessee is just one of many states that are going in the wrong direction. And we'll see these play over and over. But when do we get enough? But as cliche as it sounds, it starts with who we put in office, that you have to challenge and you have to question those people that you put in that represent us. I'm sure some of the people that are speaking against Governor Lee didn't realize how much he would be leaning on, guns. When we realize that, It could be his house. It could be his school. It could be his church. Where I'm talking about his family.
Right.
No one is immune from that. And once one community suffering is yet another too many. You know, all of the condolences. Yeah, but you know, people have a right to be mad. They have a right to be angry because what are we doing about it? And it seems like here in Tennessee we're moving a little backwards.
On the other side of this, right, you'll hear arguments, Second Amendment right, and you know, your right to protect yourself, and you'll hear people who think we want these guns to only protect ourselves from incidents like this. What would be your response to that when it comes to just an assault style rifle?
You know, an assault style weapon shouldn't be in the hands of a lay person. Law enforcement, perhaps, but when you have that the everyday citizen and the bad guy have more powerful weapons than law enforcement, then we have a problem. I think I read in some statistical data that it's 120 guns for every 100 persons.
It's shocking.
And then they're still manufacturing. And so what are we putting our emphasis on? And so where we're putting our emphasis is that's the attention, and of course the casualties are lives.
And we know today that shooter, as police entered the building, she was also opening fire
Absolutely.
on them as well with the guns that the shooter had available.
And two of them.
Yeah, it's hard to stomach. We also now have Mike, who is on line 11. Mike, can you hear us okay?
Hey, good evening, Hunter, and good evening to the professor. And first of all, my sincere condolences to the family members, friends, staff at Covington. I say prayers sent to them as a true Christian. I hate hypocritical politicians throwing out prayers like kids throwing out marbles on the ground playing. They have no meaning, no sense of true meaning, because when you see them take payback from lobbyists from 10 gun companies that are based in Tennessee, Springfield Guns, Freedom, Mohawk, Davis, Barrett, Carrier, Knight, Troy Company is just moving here recently from Massachusetts, Barrett Firearms, Knight Firearms. So you got 10 manufacturing gun companies based in Tennessee who are whining and dining our politicians at the state capitol, and they're going to do whatever those people tell them to do. And then on the back end, we have private prisoners who are ready for those people who go flip the lid and do some crazy stuff to the private prisons, core civic, to lock them up. It's like we are breeding a mess here, and we are located, for the last 10 years, Tennessee has been on the top 10 of the most dangerous states in the country by the Justice Department. People need to let that be known. Number 4 right now, the most dangerous states out of all 50 states. That should be alarming. And that's before what happened today. What happened today is a shame, and it keeps happening. And when you have Republican politicians who don't speak out against a former president with a baseball bat, swinging it at a prosecutor who's trying to stand up for the law and order, when you let stuff like that go by, you build hate in this country, and somebody's got to have the guts to say enough is enough. You can't do this. We're losing our minds in this country. We're self-evolving. We're killing ourselves. We don't have to worry about China, Russia. We're taking care of that ourselves. And once again, sorry to the family with the experience. It's sad.
Mike, thank you for calling in.
Mike said a lot.
He said a lot, and you can hear the anger. People are angry.
And rightfully so. You know, he shared information that I wasn't privy to or hadn't, looked at yet. How many gun lobbyists and companies that we're courting to come here. And the criminal justice system, I know all too well that, the United States, we incarcerate more than half the world's population, and we're not the biggest country. But it is designed, just that, and he said a lot with the private prison, because we're going to continue to keep locking people up. But as long as you have guns, and as long as you have lax laws, then we're going to forever be filling our prisons. And what do? Just treat them inhumane and, indecent, forget the rehabilitation, because, the funding and the overcrowding has just knocked that out the park. But what do? We self-destruct, like he said. We got to do better. When we know better, we do better. But we have to hold those in power accountable.
And such a conversation too nationally. We heard from Joe Biden earlier, who again called on this renewed ban to ban
Yes.
assault rifles, but in the same breath also had said we don't want to make our schools prisons, right? We don't want to take that special moments away where you're in a school and you feel safe, and it's such a hard line to teeter there, but I think everybody just wants something to change in this country.
And then everybody want to be right. You know, that bipartisanship is out the window. They don't want to let this side be correct or this, when it's the American people that are dying.
Right.
And you know, we do not want our schools to be prison, but you know what, I bet a parent would feel better if their door was locked and there was an officer standing there versus that someone could come in there. You know, a lot of the freedoms that we take for granted, just like how things changed after 9/11, it's the way of the world and it's the way of our society. And because of those same constitutional rights that we're talking about upholding, are causing us to suffer our quality of life.
It's the reality that came, unfortunately, knocking on Nashville's door this morning. We have another caller to get to. Miss Cassidy is on line 1. Cassidy, can you hear us okay?
Hello.
Hi, Cassidy. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. My heart goes out to, you know, the families and just everyone that has been affected by this tragic event, just a tragic situation. And also, the kids started their testing today. You know, all Metro kids started their TCAP testing today, so I can only imagine the stress, you know, that was on top of that with the kids. I actually found out about it at work, and it was very, you know, just a tear-jerking, and I don't know anybody, you know, at that school or anything like that, but you know, the accountability has to be held at the House of Representatives. Like, I feel like, you know, Lee and Blackburn and all of them, they should be held accountable for this tragedy that has happened in our state, and to pass something where anyone can, that's 18, I mean, you can't even buy beer, you know, but you can go buy a gun. That is horrendous. And it's just, I feel like there is evil wickedness in the House of Representatives, and I vote every chance that I can. And it's a shame that Tennessee is not a forward-thinking state, because if so, you know, it would just be a total different demographics of just people in that house that can really get things done, that can help us in this state. And I do apologize. It's just heartbreaking. And I don't know if I have a question or anything like that, but I just wanted to express that, you know, what we have in the state and all of that is just evil people to allow things to take place. Thank you.
Cassidy, thank you for calling. She said it best too. I don't know if I have a question. I don't know if I just am needing a listening ear in these times. I think everybody is coping with this in their own ways and trying to just understand just such a senseless act.
But the onus started with our legislation and the people we put in. And like you said, we have to hold them accountable. You know, you keep saying that till the next one, but we really do. And not just, you know, just a presidential election, but these everyday elections, because they are the people that are running our communities. And so we have to take, you know, we have to take responsibility and challenge those people, because again, a lot of times it's just, you know, politics or money or just how, but you need to know what a person, what their agenda really is, how they really feel. You know, it's easy to say and be sobbing when it's your school or it's, you know, your community.
Right.
Until the next one. So we'll have the focus on Nashville, Tennessee until the next shooting, and then next Nashville will be a past thing, just like Uvalde and everything else.
And you hope it's just something that, one, you never forget about the names of those who lost their lives, but also at some point you hope that we as a society, we learn something.
Absolutely.
And we stop it in its tracks. And I know that's a similar thought that a lot of Americans and a lot of Nashvillians are having tonight. We want to get now to Jane, who is on line 3. Jane, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, thank you for taking my call.
Go ahead.
And yeah, thank you for taking my call, and my heart goes out to all the families that were involved. my opinion is that the cat is out of the bag, and it's been out of the bag for years. People who have guns are not going to give up their weapons. That's just the world we live in, and I believe that what's happening, it goes beyond the scope of politics, and I believe it's a spiritual problem. I believe that one of my beliefs is that if a person wants to kill you, they'll kill you, no matter what. You know, they'll find a way to kill you. So there's a spirit that is in this nation. You know, there's a Bible verse that says that righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach. Until you might be Democrat or Republican or whatever, but until you get to the state where, you know, turning back to God, then we're going to always have these things that happen today. And I believe that only God can change the hearts and minds of folks. There's no legislature. There's no, you know, like I said, people that have these weapons, you know, they're going to, you know, they're Americans. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't tell American they can't do anything. You know, you just insult them. They'll just want to do it more. So I think the solution to the problem is turning to the God. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you for calling in.
I appreciate that, but you know, that's slippery slope with all the freedom. But I can say I'm a believer. And when we took God out of the school system, I think it has been on a slippery slope ever since. And you know, not to enforce it, you know, how it used to be when you came in and say the Pledge of Allegiance and did the morning prayer. But now you almost have to hide to pray, because that's a freedom too. That's your constitutional right to be able to use your voice and to worship and pray. But we've banned that from school. And so of course we lend ourselves to, you know, all the repercussions of that. And so he is right. I mean, you know, for those who believe and those who don't, but it's a calculated things of many things that has caused us to be that. But the fact is we have taken God out of the school. And then we have people that don't even believe that there is a God. So where do we go as a nation?
There's so many different questions in a conversation that we are going to be having for days, weeks, I imagine months to come here in Nashville. We need to take a quick break on OpenLine, and we will get to more of your calls when we come back. Hey everybody, welcome back to Monday night's edition of OpenLine. I'm your host Hunter Hoagland, joined by Lynda Williams, who is a professor of criminal justice at MTSU. All night long we have just been talking about a horrific mass shooting incident in our own neighborhood, in our own community, and we've heard so many insightful comments from our viewers, and we want to get back to some of those. I believe Ted now is on line 4. Ted, can you hear us okay?
Yes, sir.
Ted, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm glad you got a criminal justice person sitting there, so maybe they can answer a few questions. But first of all, the prisons are full. They turn people loose most time before the police can get out, even out of the office writing the report. And the man you talked to right before me, he hit the nail on the head. Our young people has no morals. And morals are built in families, and the mom, dad, where you turn the phones off, you sit at the kitchen table, you eat dinner, talk about how everybody does for the day. But guns is not the problem. I mean, there may be some, and that's what happened today. And like I said, I'm like everyone else. It breaks my heart that children was involved, and naturally my thoughts and prayers are with those families. But like the man said before me, if somebody wants to do harm, they're going to do it. They may do it with an automobile, they may do it with a flashlight, who knows, or axe. It's going to happen if they want it to happen, and you've got to come up with the resources to stop it. But until you recognize that we have a mental problem in this country, which they turn to all the mental, well, we're all mental, I guess, but you know, you can't really get help if you're a mental patient. And that's the bottom line. They're going to have to go back to the roots. Guns is one of the problems, but it's not only guns, it's automobiles, it's knives, it's axes, it's whatever, explosives, and then you had this problem in, when was it, in '64, when our president was killed. And that wasn't no assault weapon. So someone can kill the president of the United States. How are you going to stop somebody from walking into a place where there's a lot of people, like we've had several shootings? You know, they had the church shooting here in Nashville, here, close to Nashville here not long ago, which was very tragic. They're all tragic. All lives matter. I don't go with this Black Lives Matter, blue Lives Matter. All lives matter. And until you do bring the families start teaching their children the morals, some morals, it's going to continue. And you're still going to have mom and pop on TV at night saying he was a good boy. He was a good boy until he hijacked that car last night and killed 2 or 3 people. So that's all I got to say. I appreciate it.
All right, Ted, thank you for calling.
But Ted is right. It's the times in which we live. You know, the same technologies and the freedoms and everything that have come with our growth has also been to our detriment. You know, social media is good when it's used correctly, but of course it does aid the bad guy. Even as they go to that house of the shooter today, you know, how does she get those maps? How does she know the floor plan? Because it's there. It's the times we live in. You know, I was just talking to my students today. There's not a respect of authority, not just law enforcement, but even parenting. And it has been as a result because a lot of parents have led kids to nurse and to grow themselves, to develop themselves with an electronic device to pacify them, or they're left home alone, and that's how they are educating themselves. So it's a result of this zealous living that we are in, and so it's a multitude of things that lead us to where we are today.
We have another caller to get to as well. Brian is on line 5. Brian, go ahead. Brian, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I would like to say that once they pass this law where 18-year-olds can carry guns, it's really going to get crazy. Like, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you, yep.
Okay, another thing, I think they need to think about virtual schooling now.
Yeah.
And you're gonna see high school kids in gangs. They're gonna take the gang and they're gonna use the guns for certain things. So it's not a good idea to let no 18-year-old have no gun. Really, a 21-year-old really ain't ready for a gun.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Brian, thank you for calling in.
But Brian made a point. You know, this frontal cortex is not fully developed till you're 25 and 26. And we're giving an 18-year-old person that's full of emotions and, you know, and that's fed by social media and all these other things without proper guidance. We're asking for more problems. To give an 18-year-old, you know, and we have, you know, the juvenile justice system, because the juvenile justice system was created to be a more informal, a way of rehabilitation to keep folks from going into our adult criminal justice system. But we're failing. Because, you know, we're not taking care of them, and then it continues on into the adulthood. And giving a child a gun at 18,
yeah,
I might not be sitting at this desk with you, but you will have a conversation about it.
It's tough, and everybody's got this different idea, but I think everybody can agree 18, it feels so young, but that's the reality that, you know, a lot of us are living in. We need to take a quick break here on Open Line. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. Welcome back to this Monday night edition of Open Line. All night long, we've been talking about just the devastating school shooting that we have watched unfold today at the Covenant School in Green Hills. Something that we really haven't touched on yet is just the incredible response from our local law enforcement. I think it'll be a blueprint for the way other law enforcement agencies need to act in the future when it's something like this. There was an active shooter call that came in this morning at 10:13. We know officers immediately, they didn't wait. They entered and they took down that shooter in 14 minutes. 10:27 was the time that the shooter died. And Lynda, it's incredible when you compare it to other school shootings. When you look at Uvalde, when they waited over an hour to breach the classroom, they waited for all of these different people and different go-aheads. Metro Nashville Police, they got in and they got out to ultimately save lives.
So first of all, kudos to Chief John Drake and all the fine officers of Nashville, because we trained, and how you train is how you respond. And you know, you hope that you don't have to do what you know. You know, being 30 years with the Secret Service, we were trained for the what ifs. And thank God some of those things never came to fruition. And so all of the things, all the officers responded correctly, but even the protocol, the active shooter protocol was in place. Covenant did the right thing. They had their doors secured, you know, they had a notification system, but being that it was a private school, they didn't have, you know, city officials, officers. That's something that private schools have to incur themselves. But they did everything, but kudos to the officers that, you know, went in harm's way. And, you know, because it could have been more kids. It could have been more, you know, people, period. So we're trained to do something, and I'm glad that those officers, they get to go home, but they did, and they did what they did with pride, and that they saved lives. And that's what we hold our hands to do, to protect and serve. And they did that. They did that.
And we had heard from Metro Police Chief John Drake earlier today, who said the shooter was still shooting when these officers were in there, and they ran towards the gunfire. Something to be said for these incredible men and women who wear the blue.
Absolutely, and you're trained, and you hope that you never have to use that skill set, but you have to be prepared. And the fact is, the shooter was, she was on a mission. She had 2 weapons, semi-automatic, I mean, you know, assault rifles. So there was a lot of gunpowder, and then she had a rifle, I mean, a handgun. So kudos that, you know, they trained, they took cover, but they were able to neutralize and take her out.
And you are a woman in law enforcement, and you have done so many things in your 30-year career. Secret Service member, now professor of criminology. This is a unique situation, I think, and just in terms of the makeup of what we've seen out there today.
Yes, and you know, and the pride is that I've done that for over 30 years, but to be in the classroom, you know, one of my mantras is where academia meets reality, that I tell my students, this is real, and this is what you're raising your hand and say you want to do. It's not something out of Hollywood. This is the everyday life that we live, and so when you raise your hand to become law enforcement, you have to be willing to go into harm's way. And so it's my pride to be able to share that, to bring subject matter experts into the classroom, but, you know, to speak from a real perspective when I talk to my students.
Let's talk about just the investigation as a whole, right? We know that law enforcement members, the FBI, the ATF, they are on the scene of the shooter's home. We know that that 28-year-old lives with her family. They found a manifesto inside, they found maps, they found surveillance, they found all kinds of things that showed this is a very carefully thought out, methodical plan to execute such violence. Where does the investigation go in the days and the weeks ahead? I think everybody watching wants to know why. We still don't really have that answer, but will we ever even know?
We might not ever know the why. You know, even as I teach terrorism, we can't tell why the terrorists did that, whether they are aligned with some methodology or if there's mental health issues there. But the thing about it, that, you know, it's a collective effort. The days of big eyes and little U's is over with. It's a collective agent. And so when we see law enforcement collectively, from, you know, the municipalities to the federal, everybody brings resources and, you know, expertise, and we're all working to that common goal to, you know, fortify and make our communities safe. And so it's a collaborative effort, and that's what I was talking about, even, you know, after, you know, Sandy Hook, that we put that in, that, you know, DOJ can get a request and they send these federal assets to these municipalities that don't have those resources.
Now here in Nashville, we're going through it too as well, and it's going to be something we cover now for days and weeks to come, I'm sure of it. Thank you so much for being here. You had such just an incredible insight, and we're glad you were able to bring just your unique law enforcement background to shed some light on the situation.
And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Joining us on this Monday night of Open Line. I know it was a hard discussion to have when you're talking about just innocent lives that were lost, and it's tough to make sense of in the wake of such tragedy. We know there's different prayer vigils happening tonight if that's something you're interested in. You can find that on newschannel5.com. We're going to be back at 10 with a whole lot more coverage. Sportsline is next. Take care.